Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome to a very beautiful tournament that started today. Welcome to the Airthings Masters in 2022. So you know the grip that we have seen many times last year. 16 players are battling it out in 15 rounds of rapid chess. Then of course the best 8 players are moving up to the quarterfinal stage, and then when only 8 players are there, then we have the knockout stage, and then I think we'll have even some wilder games. So we're starting now the day one with a beautiful game between Andrey Esipenko and the world champion Magnus Carlsen. And Andrey Esipenko had, I think, his moment of the career when he played a really beautiful game last year where he destroyed Magnus Carlsen in one game. So you know, when Magnus Carlsen is playing against a player that beat him already, then Magnus Carlsen wants to prove himself against this player. Sometimes he gets really personal against this player. So I really was curious what's going to happen in this particular game between Esipenko and Magnus. So let's check out now the game. It was, I think, a beautiful rapid game, because in rapid chess, of course, we have inaccuracies, mistakes and blunders. So when we have that, then we have really some brilliant tactics. So here Esipenko opened with the move e4. We have e5 by Magnus, knight to f3, knight to c6, and after bishop to c4 we have the Italian game. Here Magnus goes into this two knights defense, which is perfectly fine. Many times you could also go into the knights attack, but here we have the classical system with the move d3. So perfectly fine. Magnus is really one of the best players in the Italian game, in the Ruy Lopez, in the most often popular line. So as I said, here Esipenko is saying, I'm not scared to go into a complicated game against you. I want to test you in your Italian game. So really beautiful opening choice. So here bishop to e7, we have really a close system. Here we have castling by Esipenko, and now also castling by Magnus Carlsen. Knight to c3. Also c3 is an opportunity then to create this pawn breakthrough idea with the move d4, but this move knight to c3 is more popular now these days. I think many times I see now recently this move, because with the move c3 maybe you are preparing the move d3, but here then you have also taken the natural square for your minor piece. So that's why knight to c3 also a beautiful possibility. So we have now d6, we have a4. Many times in these types of structures black is trying also to chase a little bit away this light square bishop, which is very annoying. So that's why a4, creating some breathing spaces, and now a5 also by Magnus Carlsen. We have really a symmetry now. It's really complicated to play sometimes these games, because one single inaccuracy can cause you many problems, positional problems. So that's why you have to be really careful what you're doing with your minor pieces. Where are you weakening your pawn structure? Where are you pushing pawns? Where, because you know pawns cannot go back. So that's why, as I said, here Magnus is saying, okay, I'm going to test you too in some really symmetrical system. So here we have rook to e1 by Esipenko. We have knight to b4, and this move I really didn't understand. Probably this move is maybe a preparation to create a d5 pawn breakthrough, but of course d5 in my opinion would be very risky. Knight to e5 could be then a possibility. So the e5 was weak, so bishop to g4 you have to play, I think. So really this move is not suggested by the top engines here. The main goal, I think, would be something like h6. h6 is very important, because then you don't get vulnerable to some bishop to g5 ideas. I'm not sure what Magnus was thinking with this move. Nothing wrong, maybe you're not losing the game because you played now the move knight to b4, but there is the principle in chess. With chess you should not play with the same piece twice, and Magnus moved already the knight. He moved the knight twice now without any compensation. So when you do this, you have to have at least some kind of a reason. So as I said, knight to b4, in my opinion, slightly inaccurate move here by the world champion. You'll see now why, because in a couple more moves Magnus will retreat again with the knight to c6. Really unnecessary play by the world champion. So here knight to e2, play by Esipenko, bishop to e6. We have bishop to e6, f takes e6. Okay, we have now a double pawn structure, but now this d5 idea is actually the main goal. This d5 could be prepared with knight to d7, then you're protecting the e5 pawn, and then d5 is an opportunity. But again, this knight can be always kicked away with the move c3, and then have to again retreat. So as I said, I think that the world champion lost a couple of time here, a couple of tempi in the opening stage. So here knight to g3 by Esipenko. He maneuvers now the pieces more towards the king side. You see the bishop is aiming, the knight is there, the knight is on g3. So perfect setup here by the young Russian grandmaster. So knight to c6. You see Magnus is retreating. I'm not sure about this maneuver. He didn't gain anything. I'm not saying that you should not move the piece twice in some occasions, but at least you have to have some kind of a good reason. I don't think that Magnus gained with the maneuver knight to b4, knight to c6, and x6. So here c3, protecting of course the the d5 d4 square, we have knight to d7, we have bishop to e3, and now knight to f6. Again, Magnus is playing with the knight on d7, retreating. As I said, he's maybe waiting here Esipenko to do something, and I think again that he lost simply too much time. So here d4 immediately by Esipenko. He's saying, okay, you played your knight several times without compensation. I'm going to challenge you now your center. You lost simply too much time. It's time now to pressure in the center. So e takes d4, we have c takes d4, and now a huge mistake here by Magnus Carlsen. I'm not sure what was going on now in the game. d5, it's not so good. There are many opportunities, there are many moves that you can, maybe even knight to b4 again, I'm not sure, but d5 is causing now many problems because you get this one, knight to g5. Beautiful counter attack by Esipenko. e6 here is now huge problem. Here in the continuation we have queen to d7, and now here Esipenko plays now the move e5. He's locking now the center. The cool part about this move e5 is that you cannot jump with the knight on e4. That's the beauty of Esipenko's central attack, because this square is taken twice by both of these knights. So Magnus has to retreat, and now Esipenko retreats also to h3. This is a good maneuver. You don't want to actually retreat to f3, because from this square you cannot attack anymore the weakness on e6. The pawn on e6 is actually the main weakness now in Magnus Carlsen's position. But with the move knight to h3, we can maneuver the knight to f4 again, and then with queen to g4, you see it's a different story. So beautiful play by the Russian Grandmaster. So we have rook to a6. Magnus is trying to get some kind of an attack here on the b file, but it's a little bit too slow here. Esipenko continues the pressure against this backward pawn on e6. Well, rook to b6, nothing wrong. Okay, you can have this pawn, but here Esipenko continues with this pawn, which is now, I think, a good choice. We have rook to b2, probably rook to f7, slightly better. At least you're covering yourself. At least you're not vulnerable to some checks, but here Magnus Carlsen simply took rook to b2. We have queen to e6, queen takes e6, and now after knight to e6, the rook is hanging. You have to play rook to f7, and now rook to c1. So you see, Esipenko is taking now over and over. First of all, okay, this rook is very active, but it's only attacking. This rook doesn't have support. On the other hand, look at these pieces by Esipenko. Knight on g3 is perfectly fine. Bishop on e3. Rooks are getting more and more into the game. Maybe we can also create here a b file attack. If that happens, if you try to cover yourself with the move b6, then also the knight on c6 is a little bit loose. When that is happening, then also the c7 pawn is weakness. So too many weaknesses, I think, in the position of the world champion. So g6 here by Esipenko. Rook from a to b1. We have rook to b1, rook to b1, and now knight to b4, knight to e2, and now comes c6. Here Magnus is desperately trying to fix the pawn structure because he noticed that he could have some problems on the queen side. Here in the continuation we have bishop to h6, and this is now such a beautiful move here by Esipenko. And in the beginning I really didn't even know what he's trying to do here, but he's taking now all of the squares for the rook, so the rook cannot escape anymore. Here in the continuation Magnus plays now rook to f5, and the problem is now that you could get challenged here. f4, f5. This rook is becoming more and more endangered. Here, as I said, if you play f4, then for instance you try rook to h5, maybe to attack the bishop, but now with the bishop to g5, here bishop, if you try for instance bishop to g5, here f takes g5, you see the rook could be trapped. Really wild position of the rook. So as I said, this is now already such an endangered position here for Magnus Carlsen's rook. But here Esipenko tried g4. He's kicking away further the rook. f4, as I said, would be slightly better. Then with g4, f5, we can create really some madness, and you see the rook has only one square to escape, which is now the f7 square. And as I said, maybe in the later stage we can also include this knight into the game. So these three minor pieces are causing now many problems for the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So after move g4, rook to f3, finally Magnus is trying to escape with the rook. We have bishop to e3, king to f7, attacking now the knight, and now knight to f4. So you see the knights are locking now the rook all over the board. Here we have g5, the only move to protect your rook, and now knight to h5. But again, you see Esipenko is now using all of the squares all over the board. Although Magnus is escaping with the rook, but now with the move knight, sorry, we're not going to answer that. Okay, But you see, Esipenko is getting more and more active with his pieces. Whenever Magnus is pushing a pawn, the position gets worse and worse for him. So here we have now king to g8, now king to g2, and now here Magnus Carlsen again escaped with the rook to f8. We have h4, beautiful move. Here we have h6, and now knight to g3. You see, again, with every pawn move, basically the position gets worse and worse for Magnus Carlsen. Now the f5 square is a huge weakness. From this square also the h6 is a weakness. So then the bishop is hanging. Both of these knights are simply dancing. Even if you take here, then the h6 is hanging. So as I said, maybe in the later stage we can also include the rook into the game. 4 pieces will be then very, very active. So you see, first of all, this knight on e8, such a bad piece here by Magnus Carlsen. Also the rook, the bishop, as I said, all of the pieces are simply bad. The knight doesn't have support. It's simply a lonely place on the queen side. So here king to f7, knight to f5. Beautiful square for the knight. We have rook to h8, knight takes e7, king takes e7. We have h takes g5, h takes g5, bishop to g5. This is now a lost game for Magnus Carlsen. King to f7, f4. Now the pawns are storming. Rook to g8, king to g3, knight to c7, and now after move knight to f6, the position is really lost. The rook is hanging. You can now push these 2 pawns. 3 connected pawns are simply too much to handle here for the world champion. So rook to g7, bishop to h6, attacking the rook, rook to g6, and here after move g5, knight to e6, and here after move f5, rook to f6 was played. Huge blunder again by Magnus Carlsen in this position. Magnus resigned. Of course, you can take the rook, then also the knight is hanging. Here, of course, white is up the exchange, and the game is over for the world champion. So it's becoming more and more obvious that something is not working for Magnus against Esipenko. This is, of course, still an early stage of the tournament. Magnus played these dubious moves with the knights. I'm not sure about that. Cool game by Esipenko. He deserved his win. He played a really accurate game in the later stage of the game. Played really so beautiful tactics against the rook. Won the game eventually, and has now really beautiful position maybe to reach the knockout stage. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. A beautiful game by Esipenko. Let's check out now what will happen now in the continuation of the tournament. I'll try to cover more and more games, and if you like this content, you can also check out some other videos that I've some other games that I've analyzed before, and you can also check out my comment to chess games played by computers, in which we analyze the best games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.